let me explain what a prokaryote is and what a eukaryote is, and then you'll see why I actually underline those things. You'll see that Soldier Boy might help a little bit in biology. First, prokaryotes are basically bacteria. And I say that they're single-celled because bacteria are only one cell. Each of them is one cell. So they're tiny, 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 right? When you go and you actually catch some bacteria, you might get sick. You can't see it, right? It's that tiny. So the most important thing you got to remember is that prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. They don't have this thing called a nucleus, and we'll get into what a nucleus is in just a moment. They don't have a nucleus, and how do I remember? I like rhyme. So I know that pro is in that word, and I'll remember pro equals no. Okay? So pro equals no. Pro equals no nucleus. I will remember that. Okay? So if you look here, I'm not lying to you. This is nucleoid. That's not a nucleus. Okay? So there's no nucleus in this guy. But in eukaryotes, there is a nucleus. This guy in the middle. Okay? There is a nucleus in eukaryotes, but not in prokaryotes, because pro equals no. So in eukaryotes are basically, they're not small. They're not like bacteria. They're not tiny. They're animals and plants mostly. And I know you don't like hearing this, but humans are considered animals. All humans. And so eukaryotes are multicellular. So we're animals. We're made of animal cells. So I like to think of eukaryotes. We're eukaryotes. Okay? And the most important thing here is, you know that prokaryotes don't have a nucleus. Eukaryotes must then have the nucleus. That's the major difference. These guys have a nucleus. So why am I talking about me as a eukaryote? This is why. In the word eukaryote, here's where Soldier Boy comes in. I don't have much rhythm, but I know that Soldier Boy says something, something, you. And so I like to think that eukaryotes are like you and me. And so I will remember that eukaryotes are these big multicellular organisms, and they have nuclei. They're not like bacteria. So remember Soldier Boy, and you'll remember that eukaryotes have a nucleus, and they're like you and me, because they're animals and also plants. Okay? Next. Alright, so now let's look at these eukaryotes, right? We've got these eukaryotes. The two major types of eukaryotes now are animals and plants. Okay, the big guys. In all animal and plant cells, not only do they have, like we said before, not only do they have a cell membrane, not only do they have a cytoplasm, not only do they have ribosomes, they also have these two things. They have a nucleus, and what is your nucleus? I really don't have a really good way to remember it. For some reason it just sticks in my mind. I think of nucleus and I think of like the center. Think of the middle. And so it's the control center of the cell. It's basically where you have the DNA, the most important information, your genetic info. Okay, the most important info. It's like your control center. It's like a little computer. It's like your brain. Controls what goes on in your cell. Okay? Now the mitochondria, got a good way to remember that guy. The mitochondria is where the energy is produced for the cell. Okay? So mitochondria is where the energy is made for the cell, because the cell needs energy. We need energy to live. Otherwise, just like some of my students, sometimes they knock out. They don't got a lot of energy. Well, in order to show me that you're alive, show me that energy. So for these cells to live, they need energy, and it comes from the mitochondria. That's where it's made. How are you going to remember that mitochondria make energy? Here's how you remember. The mighty mitochondria. Now, I have no muscles, but the mighty mitochondria sure have energy. And so I remember mighty helps me remember energy. And if I remember mighty, I will remember mitochondria has to do with energy. Mighty mitochondria. Alright? Powerhouse of the cell. Now, to sum up, we have the animal cell, and that's, we know animals and plants are pretty different. So plants are different in this way. All cells have cell membrane, cytoplasm, and ribosomes. That's all cells. Animal cells have those three, as well as nucleus and mitochondria. Plant cells have all of that, and just a little bit more. Okay? Because plants are just that special. Okay? So plants have these things that are different from the animal cells. They have extra stuff. They have a chloroplast. Okay? And the chloroplast in the plant cell gives the plant its green color. That's one thing it does. It gives it a green color. Lots of plants are green. And it's where photosynthesis takes place. And you may have heard of this word before. It's basically, photosynthesis is where energy is absorbed from the sun, right? We know all plants need sun. sunlight, in order to grow. So they take the energy from the sun in order to make food for themselves. They need that energy to make the food. And how do I remember? One thing I use to remember chloroplast is that I see in the word chloroplast, that's almost like color. It looks almost like color for me. Sometimes I get a little dyslexic and I look at the word and I'm like, oh, it looks like color to me. So this looks like color to me, and so I remember chloroplast, I think of color. Chloroplast, color, and there's something else might go on in there, and that's where the photosynthesis must take place, right? It's not just color. Cell wall. Here's the last thing for the plants. You can let me know, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. Plants don't have bones, okay? Plants don't have bones. So how are they going to stay upright? Like, how is a plant going to stay just like that tree out there? I don't know if you can see it. There's a tree out there, I promise you. We have a nice view right here. So that tree, how does that tree stand, tall and straight? Or how do other plants stay tall and straight? And the important thing here is that they have a cell wall. Not only do they have the membrane, they have another guy on the outside, and that is because it needs support. This cell wall is rigid, it's tough. I think of my walls in my room, and I know I can't walk through them because they're really tough and rigid, and they're really there and they're sturdy. That's what keeps our building up. And so same thing. The cell walls in a plant are what keeps it nice and sturdy and keeps it nice and straight from falling down, getting the nice sunlight from the sun. Okay? Alright, so that's why you need a cell wall for a plant. Last thing! You might be wondering, I talked about a little bit about Soldier Boy, I brought a little Kanye in there a little bit, so you might be wondering, can cells move? Do they have rhythm? My students say I have no rhythm at all. They say I'm the worst dancer in the world. But cells have a lot of rhythm. Absolutely, when you play a little Cupid shuffle, they can move. And when they move, they use these things right here. How do they move? They use either a tail, which is called a flagellum. The flagellum is the tail. Flagellum, tail. Flagellum, tail. That's that guy there. And so the other way, sometimes other cells, this guy right here is dividing, by the way. So 100 points if you know what that means when a cell divides, like this guy. What do you see? So zoom in if you can right there, and you see little hair-like structures. Okay, these little tiny, tiny hair-like structures are called cilia. Okay? So this guy moves with these tiny, tiny little cilia. This guy right here, the flagellum, moves by whipping that tail and just moves forward. And this is just like a sperm cell. Sperm cells move this way with a flagellum. Okay? Other cells may need a little cilia to move around, get a little rhythm going. Alright? Well, now you should be equipped to roar on that HSA. It's time to show that you've been listening and that you know what you're doing. So I want you to approach this, like I said, wildcats roar, they don't meow. So when you get this, I don't want you to be like all scared and like this. Yeah, no, none of that please. No panties, no panties. What I do want is I want you to approach this guy like a real wildcat. And I want you to roar.